killing Fulani people. That's the story being whispered in backroom briefings in Paris, shouted in protests outside African embassies, and copy-pasted across Western headlines. Here are some examples from well-known sources. But are they following the same script? Is there anyone doing the propaganda? If yes, what is the truth they are hiding?
Tucker Carlson, he has returned to Moscow. Obviously, we know how people reacted when he interviewed Vladimir Putin, because you're not supposed to ever listen to these people in their own words. You have to rely on the mainstream media to tell you who these people are. And around the world, they tell us all the same thing. They're all terrorists and dictators, and everything that we do is perfectly above board. And we're usually just trying to spread democracy. And I think spreading democracy maybe is a code word for dropping bombs on civilians. But I'm not sure.
I am so proudly African right now. A proud daughter of the African soil, honestly speaking. And I'm so happy that the sleeping giant, I would say, is busy awakening, honestly speaking, because there's so many movements going on. And I'm just so very kind of proud to be part of the movement that is really coming to the surface of, like, you know what? We had enough, okay? We are not our parents. We are a new breed of African soldiers. We are not our parents. Our parents didn't have the kind of technology that we now have, where we can actually be able to share things and all those, to prevent all those narratives that are being created, that have been created in the past with our leaders. We have been back and forth. We have been beaten. We have been brutalized. We have been called names. We have been told that our skin is not so beautiful. We have been told that our hair is not beautiful and all that. We know all that. Now we know. And that's why this specific channel was created for the very reason of just, embracing our culture, embracing our tradition, embracing being comfortable in our own skin, loving our hair the way they are and all that. But at the same time, now we are moving towards also being like kind of creating or creating that awareness of what's going on in the world. So we're including that. So welcome back to the Black Consciousness Movement channel. And on today's episode, we're going to handle what we call, because remember, we have a movement right now that is awakening people. And we have a leader that they want to kill, honestly speaking. And the more we share information about what's really going on versus what they are telling us is going on, I think that is going to be important. And today I'm going to share about what is Ibrahim Traore trying to do when it comes to wanting to back up his currency with the gold resources that they have in their own country. So I'm going to start with a system called the Bretton Woods system. And it was an international monetary agreement that was established in 1944 following World War II. So, and this is the thing, it aimed to create a stable and predictable global exchange rate system, primarily by fixing currency to the US dollar. Listen to that. Fixing currency to the US dollar, which was anyway, the US dollar now itself convertible to gold at a fixed rate of $35 per ounce. This system, also known as the gold exchange standard, lasted from 1945 to 1971. Incredible. Thank God it actually ended. Because when you look at that system, that's where what we call the World Bank and the IMF came from. And you know very well who controlled those. It's act like, oh no, like it's kind of like giving you loans and so on, but it really gives you loans that has ridiculous interest rate. So when, our African countries, are trying to kind of, like, this is the system. This is like you going to a bank to borrow money, and you want to obviously borrow money to start a business. But in the process of starting this business, all the money that you borrow, all the money that you make out of the business are actually paying the interest. So you are literally just surviving. hand to mouth. That's what we call it. But there is another person who has more money, and when they borrow money, they actually get less interest rate. Can you see what that is? That's absolute nonsense. And I think this is what Ibrahim Traore is trying to do for his own country. But they are so angry, they want to kill him, literally. They want to finish him. Listen to that, to this next video, and then you will know what I'm talking about.
The global gold market is tightly controlled. Western economies hedge currency, insure banks, and back investments with it. So when Africa starts saying, we'll refine and keep our gold here, you're not just disrupting trade, you're challenging the monetary order. This isn't just about Burkina Faso. It's about sovereignty over value. If African nations begin using gold to back currencies, fund security independently, or resist IMF dependency, the financial ripple effect will be global. That's what they fear. When Western governments lose control over how and where African gold flows, they lose a tool of leverage. This fear manifests as diplomatic pressure, economic threats, and yes, military rhetoric like Langley's. Resource nationalism isn't a dirty word, it's a right. Every country has the right to control what lies beneath its soil. But when African leaders attempt it, they're called dictators, nationalists, or threats. It's the oldest game in the book, and it's one of the main reasons leaders like Patrice Lumumba, Muammar Gaddafi, and Thomas Sankara were eliminated or overthrown. Traore's crime is not tyranny, it's independence. He is defying a decades-long tradition where African wealth props up foreign economies. By rejecting that model, he invites both admiration from Pan-Africanists and opposition from international stakeholders. You can't talk about Captain Ibrahim Traore without mentioning Thomas Sankara, the revolutionary leader who once renamed Upper Volta to Burkina Faso, meaning land of upright people. Sankara also pushed for local control of resources, rejected IMF loans, and cut the salaries of top officials, including his own. His vision was of a self-sufficient Africa, proud, independent, and united. But in 1987, that vision was cut short. Sankara was assassinated in a coup many believe had foreign fingerprints. Today, Traore is walking a similar path, and the global reaction is chillingly familiar. When a young African leader dares to prioritize his people and control national wealth, the old powers start circling again. Western narratives about Africa haven't changed. The media constantly portrays independent African leaders as strong men, dictators, or military juntas, while ignoring the will of the people behind them. Captain Traore's rise wasn't some self-serving power grab. It came from a failing system, supported by the youth and the people who were tired of foreign-dominated leadership. But the moment African leaders reject foreign control, the media switches gears. They're corrupt. They're militarizing. They're authoritarian. It's propaganda. And it's not new. The same was said of Kwame Nkrumah, Gaddafi, and even Nelson Mandela at one point. What matters is not how the world sees them, but how Africa remembers and supports them. Burkina Faso is not alone. The Sahel region is undergoing a political transformation. Mali, Niger, and Guinea have also taken bold steps toward reclaiming national sovereignty, cutting ties with foreign forces and pushing for local control.
Now, in today's videos, we're going to discuss three things. We're going to discuss three terms: dictator, democracy, and terrorist. I'm going to give you the dictionary meaning of those words, but I'm also going to share how those words can actually change meaning to fit a specific narrative, meaning that you can be a terrorist to, like, what the West regard as a terrorist, another country might regard as a freedom fighter. But who determines who's a freedom fighter and who's a terrorist? And who determines who's a dictator, right? Who are you dictating to, right? And who determines what is democracy and what does that mean? You know? Okay, we're going to discuss that, and then we're going to discuss what does it mean to back up your currency with gold? And what does that mean for your country if you do that? Okay? And then we're also going to discuss how they actually can kill your good leader by just labeling him. You know, they're gonna label him, he's a dictator, he's a whatever, he's a terrorist, he's trying to kill people and all that. Because now there's a story going on about Traore that he's busy killing the Fulanis. But is that true? Where is this story coming from? Why is it not coming from Burkina Faso? Why is it coming from France? Why is it coming from other Western media? Where are they getting this information from? So you know what? We are a different breed of Africans. We have learned our lesson. We know what they did to our leaders. We know what they did to the likes of Gaddafi, Patrice Lumumba, Thomas Sankara, like, you know, even John Magufuli. I think people don't really mention John Magufuli that much because they think he died of an infection. But we know that he was the only one. He was the only African leader who was actually anti-COVID. You know, like, oh no, there's, you know, like, I think we know the story. So in this video, we're going to discuss that. So let's get started. So welcome back. Like I said, we are discussing three things. And the first is to give you a dictionary meaning of the different words that I mentioned. I'm going to start with dictator. Now, what is a dictator? What does that mean? According to the dictionary, what it means is that it's a ruler with total power over a country, typically one who has obtained control by force. A person who behaves in an autocratic way, okay? That's a dictionary meaning, okay? Now, let's go to the word terrorist. A person who uses unlawful violence and intimidation, especially against civilians, in the pursuit of political gains or aims, okay? And then let's go to democracy. That's probably, for me, that's the most misused word. The word democracy comes from the Greek word demos, meaning people, and kratos, meaning power. So democracy can be thought of as power of the people, a way of governing which depends on the will of the people, right? Now let's go into details about these words, you know. So now I will start with dictator, right? For me now, I'm throwing the dictionary meaning out of it because now we realize that meanings are taken out of proportion depending on who wants to accomplish what. Because dictator means, as we were saying, somebody who's like kind of, I think, forceful in his control over a certain country, right? Now, when you look at that, what I found is that when those meanings are assigned to African leaders, they actually change meaning. Because most of the time now I realize, especially now that they're calling Ibrahim Traore a dictator, now I realize that dictator is actually synonymous with a very loving leader. And it might not be loving in the sense of like lovey-dovey, but a leader who is passionate about changing the status quo of that country, of how things has been run. A leader whose heart is with his people. A leader who can literally die for his people is actually labeled by the Western media as a dictator. That's what we are finding out. So if they start calling your leader a dictator, then you need to know that that leader is actually a good leader. Now we're realizing that. Because remember, didn't they label Patrice Lumumba a dictator before they killed him, before they assassinated him? They did that, isn't it? So they do that to create that narrative so that you start believing, oh no, and this is a problem. And that's why I'm saying I'm proudly African, because our people are awakening. Because what they do is they use your own people. They use us to kill our own people. That is the problem. And there's another thing that I wanted to share as well. I don't know whether I mentioned that. I will, because obviously we're talking about the, like the words. So let me go to the next one because I don't want the video to be too long. Now let's look at democracy.
Tucker Carlson, he has returned to Moscow. Obviously, we know how people reacted when he interviewed Vladimir Putin because you're not supposed to ever listen to these people in their own words. You have to rely on the mainstream media to tell you who these people are. And around the world, they tell us all the same thing. They're all terrorists and dictators, and everything that we do is perfectly above board. And we're usually just trying to spread democracy. And I think spreading democracy maybe is a code word for dropping bombs on civilians. But I'm not sure.
A leader that is elected by people, obviously, for the people. But, okay, let's use the example of Ibrahim Traore. Ibrahim Traore, obviously, got into power through a coup. And you know what that means, But would you blame someone when they do that, knowing that the person in power is actually selling themselves out to foreign interference? And the thing is, even though he got into power through a coup, his people now love him. Every single person, like in Burkina Faso, is rooting for this president. Now, the problem is, what I have a problem with is this. Let's look at democracy on another kind. Like, for example, Thomas Sankara, who was also from Burkina Faso, and Patrice Lumumba from the Congo were democratically elected, right? Right? Democratically elected, right? So they were chosen by the people. But guess what? That was not enough, right? It was not enough because they were chosen by the people and their hearts were really for the people, right? So we start to notice that this trend of like, okay, so what is democracy really? Who's really elected democratically? Because when you look at the leaders that were elected democratically, they were killed, they were assassinated by obviously Western power using our own people. We know that. Come on, there's no secret anymore. We're not going to keep it a secret. So now, when you have a leader like Ibrahim Traore, why would you want, when you can see the different things that he's doing, and I'm going to share now. Let me share now, Evan.
At just 34 years old, Captain Ibrahim Traore became the youngest leader in the world when he took power in 2022. A former army officer, he rose in response to public frustration over insecurity and economic challenges in Burkina Faso. But what makes Traore different isn't just his age or background, it's his vision. He believes Africa must rely on its own resources and stand proudly without waiting for approval or permission from the West. While many leaders give speeches, Traore takes action. He speaks about sovereignty, self-reliance, and service to the people. And in July 2024, he put those beliefs into motion with one of the most ambitious health initiatives Africa has ever seen. One that's changing lives already. With the launch of free, full-service mobile clinics, Burkina Faso has taken healthcare where it's needed most, to the people. These are not just ambulances or pop-up tents. Each clinic is a fully equipped vehicle offering prenatal care, ultrasound screenings, breast and cervical cancer detection, basic emergency services, child health checks. The focus? Women and children, the backbone of every society, and too often the most neglected. The initiative was rolled out to all 13 regions of Burkina Faso, reaching remote villages where the nearest hospital is sometimes a full day's journey away. And here's what really shocked the world. These clinics were 100% free. They were not funded by outside donors. They were paid for using Burkina Faso's own gold reserves, turning natural wealth into public good. Captain Traore's team said it clearly. We are investing our own resources in our own people. We do not need to beg for help. During a joint discussion with regional military officials, a U.S. general reportedly asked about the costs and logistics of such an ambitious program. When he learned it was funded through gold, not loans or foreign partnerships, he fell silent. According to witnesses, he was visibly stunned, not by the technology, but by the principle. This wasn't about what Burkina Faso could do. It was about what it was willing to do, without Western aid. African citizens around the continent began to share the story online. The hashtags #Captain Traore, #Gold for Health, and #Make Africa Great began trending in Francophone and Anglophone regions alike. Influencers, journalists, and even diaspora leaders began praising the move. Commentators said things like, "This is the Africa we've been waiting for. Gold should feed our people, not sit in foreign banks. If Traore can do it, why not other leaders?" Meanwhile, critics of Western aid models began pointing to this moment as proof that Africa doesn't need saving. It needs sovereignty. This story isn't just about clinics. It's about dignity. It's about belief in African potential. It's about a leader who used gold, the same gold often taken out of Africa, to give life back to its people. Captain Ibrahim Traore's mobile clinics show us that true leadership is not about making speeches at summits. It's about meeting people where they are. Rural women in Burkina Faso now have access to care that will save lives. Children will grow up healthier, communities will thrive, and a continent will watch, and perhaps follow. Because when one country stands tall, others rise too. This is more than news. This is inspiration. This is what it looks like when we choose to make Africa great, together.
So when you have a leader that does that build hospital for people, that gives them free, free healthcare, why would you want to kill him? Especially if you are the one saying that, oh no, Africa cannot manage themselves, oh no, we are a third world country, we are poor and so on. Why can you leave us alone? Allow our leaders to lead us. Why are you so into wanting to, assassinate someone whom you know that is doing very well for your country, especially if you act like you have good intentions for us? That's when we know that, these people don't have good intentions for us. It's not like they're trying to help us. It's not like they're trying to stabilize our countries when they have their military forces in our countries. No, it's because they want to control us. That's why they don't want us to have anything to do with China or Russia, who obviously treat us like humans in that sense of like when it comes to, maybe like global trade and so on. They will always find something to say that this and this and this. Anyway, the third point that I wanted to bring across is, as I said, when they start, and I think I mentioned it while I'm, kind of talking about democracy, let's talk about terrorists. A terrorist from the Western, like for example, let's take an example of somebody who was called a terrorist. Nelson Mandela was called a terrorist, yet he was fighting the apartheid regime for 40 years, non-violence. But he was called a terrorist. And guess what? Now they started calling him a hero. And I don't want to say why they started calling him a hero. I'm going to leave it at that because I know Mandela was very old and there were things that he was pressurized to do and so on. So I'm not going to kind of throw him under the bus. He did what he could at that moment, what was needed for his, country, I would say. But that's why we're going to go back to that word, dictatorship, because now they're saying Ibrahim Traore is a dictator and he needs to be killed and he needs to, he's killing the Fulanis and so on. But it's not true. That's what they are doing every single time. That's what they have been doing every single time when it comes to our leaders.
Traore is killing Fulani people. That's the story being whispered in backroom briefings in Paris, shouted in protests outside African embassies, and copy-pasted across Western headlines. Here are some examples from well-known sources. But are they following the same script? Is there anyone doing the propaganda? If yes, what is the truth they are hiding? Let's find out. In today's world, a bullet doesn't have to be fired to wound a nation. All it takes is a headline, clean, clever, and cruel enough to frame a war that never happened. That's what's unfolding in the case of Burkina Faso. The world is being told, not asked, not shown, but told, that Ibrahim Traore's military is waging a coordinated ethnic cleansing campaign against Fulani people. Not just fighting insurgents, no, killing Fulani people, they say. Entire communities, no mercy, no distinction, and if you see this news, you would be compelled to hate Traore. Now pause for a second and ask yourself this. Where is this information coming from? Because if it were happening on the ground, on the scorched plains of Djibo, or the crowded markets of Ouahigouya, the first to sound the alarm wouldn't be journalists in Paris or analysts in Brussels. It would be the Burkinabe people themselves. Yet the core voices pushing this Fulani massacre narrative are rarely from Burkina Faso. They're from foreign media outlets, NGOs, anonymous investigators, and exile accounts, many of whom haven't set foot in the Sahel in years. The anatomy of these headlines follows a familiar formula. Start with a clickbait accusation. Burkina Faso, unlawful killings, disappearances by the army. Source it to an unnamed NGO or human rights monitor. No footage, no coordinates, no names of victims. Add in emotional testimony from anonymous voices, often pulled from social media or unverified diaspora accounts. Wrap it all up with a political punchline. A call for international investigation, UN sanctions, or Western intervention. And just like that, the story is ready to be believed. But believing is one thing. Understanding is another. Let's take one infamous example. A widely circulated article published by VOA. The headline: Report accuses Burkina Faso's military of killings, torture. But the content beneath that headline didn't contain a single confirmed photograph, no video, and no satellite verification. The evidence? Reports, which were neither named nor independently confirmed. The massacre it described. Turns out, it was a zone where militants had attacked a military convoy just hours before. Nowhere in the article was that military context mentioned. Just death, ethnicity, and outrage. The same pattern repeats across dozens of similar reports. They take real military operations, often in areas where insurgent groups operate openly, and strip them of context. They reduce every insurgent death to an act of ethnic targeting, even if it happened during a raid on confirmed insurgent camps. And they ignore the fact that many Fulani themselves serve in the Burkinabe armed forces, local defense groups, or are victims of insurgency too. The effect is devastating, not to Traore's army, but to the truth. What these stories do is feed the narrative that African governments cannot conduct counter-terror operations without becoming genocidal. That any military strike in Fulani areas is automatically an act of ethnic aggression. African leadership cannot be trusted to handle its crises. It's colonial logic with a new coat of paint. Africans must be supervised, restrained, watched. And if they step outside the lines, even in self-defense, they must be publicly shamed and globally punished. But the more you zoom in on these headlines, the more they fall apart. Now the question is, who is Traore fighting against? Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. To answer that, we have to step away from the noise and into the dust and sweat of Burkina Faso's real battlefield. Not the imaginary one carved out in European headlines, but the one that stretches across the northern provinces, deep into zones that were once written off as lost to terror. Because what's happening in Burkina Faso right now isn't genocide. It's a military revolution, not just in tactics, but in ideology. And it's being led by a captain who understands one brutal fact: insurgency doesn't care about ethnicity, and neither can the fight against it. Under Ibrahim Traore's leadership, the Burkinabe military has undergone a transformation that most analysts still haven't caught up with. What they assume is a ragtag army lashing out blindly is, in reality, a deeply organized campaign with surgical objectives. Let's break.
Anyway, I don't want to make our videos very long, so we are coming to the end of this. Please share, subscribe, like and comment, and push that notification button. We're gonna start actually posting videos every other day or every day even, because this movement need to go on. Ibrahim Traore, we need to pray for him. He needs to be protected. Anyway, from me, Jehovah, bye guys.